These running backs are going to break out in fantasy football this year, and you need them on your team. So the first one up, this is a guy that I have been high on for forever. My first name is Jordan Mason, and we always talk about in fantasy football post-hype sleepers. And this is a guy that, honestly, in my personal opinion, fits that almost perfectly. He was supposed to take over the role last year of being the lead back in Minnesota and doing all these things, in my personal opinion, that was going to be special in fantasy football as a runner. And I thought he did. He was great as a running back in overall in real football last year. But the thing was, it didn't really translate to fantasy football. Aaron Jones is a year older, and I think that I'm just high on the Minnesota Vikings this year. That's first and foremost. But people are forgetting that Jordan Mason is a very good runner of the football and will be the lead guy, in my personal opinion, as Aaron Jones just continues to get older. I'll start this off by saying that the metrics still love Jordan Mason as a runner. Just to rattle off a few of these stats, the guy is 10th amongst all qualified running backs in yards after contact per attempt. He was 11th in yards per carry. He was 30th in the league in carries, but still ended up 22nd in total explosive runs and 27th in missed tackles forced. So the guy is always creating opportunities that aren't necessarily there. I think Jordan Mason is going to have, like I said, more opportunity. The injuries bugged him a little bit last year, and that obviously took him away just a bit. But yeah, no, I think this is the year for Jordan Mason and an offense that's going to be even better with the threat of a guy that I mentioned in our quarterback breakout video, by the way, Kyler Murray. The threat to run there will open up more holes for Jordan Mason. And on top of that, they have a quarterback that can actually throw the football this year. Kyler Murray is going to open things up both with his legs and with his arm for Jordan Mason. And the guy still averaged damn near 5 yards per carry, and for his career is well over 5 yards per carry. So I think Jordan Mason as the goal line back there and a guy that's going to get over 200 rushing attempts is going to probably clear 1,000 yards and be effective for you in fantasy football. So
yeah, Jordan Mason's a guy that we both love his skill set. You mentioned all the metrics. As an actual running back, as a runner, the advanced stats loved him. Something to note here, I don't know how much stock you want to put into this. This is on July 4th. Supposedly, Vikings insider Matthew Collar said that this is Jordan Mason's backfield, and Aaron Jones will mainly spell and eat into passing downs. Do with that information what you will. Everything else that I'm reading on the Vikings backfield is that no one knows.
yes.
So it's a good dart throw. This is a guy who should see more volume as Aaron Jones, gets older and can't handle as much work, and also isn't as effective as he once was. So, yeah, I think Jordan Mason, and there's always the caveat of Aaron Jones potentially missing time. And that's when this guy becomes a league winner. So, yeah, I definitely like Jordan Mason, and I'm sure he's definitely a good value in terms of ADP as well.
He's a ridiculous value.
Yeah. The running back that I think could actually break fantasy football this year is Omarion Hampton. This is one of my guys, one of my draft crushes. I'm a UNC football fan, so I've watched a lot of Omarion Hampton in my days. His last 2 college seasons posted over 1,500 yards and 15-plus touchdowns. The guy showed he could handle a full workload. He was that North Carolina football team. It didn't translate too much, but they were that's a story for another day. He was a combine standout last year, too, and that's what kind of boosted him into being a first-round running back. Posted a 4.78, I think, RAS score, which is just outrageous. He had a rough year last year. He posted, 500 total yards, I think, and 5 total touchdowns. It wasn't much, but dealt with injuries.
Yep.
In 4 games last year that he played 65% of snaps or more, he posted 20.1 fantasy points per game. In those games, he averaged about 20 touches, 70-ish rushing yards, 4.9 per carry. And the fun part, 5.3 receptions and 35 receiving yards a game, which is exactly what you want to see in a half PPR, full PPR format. He showed he can handle the full workload. He dealt with a bunch of injuries last year. The Chargers themselves dealt with a bunch of injuries last year. The O-line was banged up all year long. The O-line's revamped. They're healthy. And then the Mike McDaniel effect. And what is the first thing Mike McDaniel does when he gets there as the offensive coordinator? He brings in his guy Alec Ingold to play fullback, and then Charlie Kohler over from the Ravens as a blocking tight end. That's the scheme Mike McDaniel wants to run. He wants to get extra blockers out there for his running backs. 2023, Raheem Mostert was a top 5 fantasy running back. And then the past 2 years with Mike McDaniel, Devon Achane was a top 5 fantasy running back. The stars aligned for this guy to potentially lead the entire NFL in touchdowns and see 70-plus receptions. This is a guy who a lot of people, I'd be on fantasy football Twitter. It's Bijan and Gibbs as number 1 and number 2 in whatever order, and there's a lot of speculation, a lot of question marks surrounding who's going to be that number 3 guy in fantasy football this year. This is a guy who I'm not going to say he will. I haven't statted everyone out. He has as good of a chance as anyone.
Yeah.
He's as good of a chance as anyone. He's playing with an elite offensive coordinator in Mike McDaniel, playing with an elite quarterback in Justin Herbert. Pretty good weapons. There should be a lot of scoring opportunities for him, and he projects to be a full bell cow, which there's not many of them in the NFL right now.
No, not at all. I just want to say about Omarion Hampton, I actually did end up statting the Chargers out in its entirety, and let me just say that Omarion Hampton landed as a top 5 running back in my fantasy football rankings, with over 1,300 rushing yards and like 60-something targets. The guy is very, very, very skilled. That's not a question at all. And as you said, the Mike McDaniel offense, and they will be running a ton of 3 tight end sets, which will only help the running game, in my personal opinion. So that's the new meta in the NFL, it seems. So. Right. Yeah, I'm all in on Omarion Hampton.
I mean, like I said, in the games he got 65% of snaps. He was averaging 5.5 targets. Let's just call it 5. You pace that out over a 17 game. That's 75 plus targets. Yep. So that's 85 plus targets actually. So yeah, I mean, he could easily clear 60, 70 receptions. He should be a beast.
100%. I think he's probably where's he being drafted? Start of the second, is it right now?
Yeah, I think they have him as like the RB8 or RB9 right now.
That's, in my opinion, ridiculous value. On that 1-2 turn, I will be all over that Omarion Hampton situation.
Yeah, I don't want to talk too much about like ADP and the draft board and stuff like that, but fantasy Twitter is a weird place right now, because everyone loves the situation for Omarion Hampton, but no one likes the ADP and the cost of Omarion Hampton, which I was texting Jason, not to go too into detail, but I was texting Jason about this, and it doesn't make sense. Because if everyone hates the ADP, why is the ADP that high?
Exactly.
Like, why aren't you getting him on more of a discount? But
exactly.
If everyone keeps hating him, this is a guy who might fall down a little bit, honestly. Like, if people hate the ADP that much, he's going to continue to fall down. So.
All the better for people that want him. So I'm all for it. I think it's a great pick in the 1-2 turn, in my personal opinion. So the next one up for me is David Montgomery, a guy that got traded and actively pursued by the Texans, and a 4th-round pick for an aging running back. You would have thought, we all looked at it and we were like, why the hell would the Texans end up doing that? For the football organization, maybe not the best move, but for anybody who owns David Montgomery in a dynasty league or plans to draft David Montgomery, let me tell you right now, you're still going to get a back that is very effective. Last year, he was 19th in yards after contact amongst all qualified running backs. He had the 7th best receiving grade in the NFL amongst all running backs. And just a quick little stat for you, David Montgomery has caught 60 of his last 67 targets.
Wow.
And averages over 8 yards a catch on that. It's pretty ridiculous. The guy's an elite pass catcher, but has, unfortunately, for his case, been behind the best in the NFL, or one of the best in the entire NFL, in Jahmyr Gibbs. So now he gets a backfield all to himself with very limited competition in Woody Marks. I don't think Woody Marks is going to be taking much from him. Woody Marks also had 36 targets last year. I'm expecting a majority of those, and whatever Nick Chubb's work was, to be David Montgomery's work now. And again, like I said, the guy also averaged 4.5 yards per carry last year. So people are just overblowing the notion that the guy is just getting a little bit too old. And we've seen in the past that he can handle a full workload, be the bell cow running back. And the guy has taken off the last few years of basically not having to take too much damage. But yeah, I'm all in on David Montgomery, especially at his current price. But as you said, these are going to change drastically over the coming weeks. But I mean, if David Montgomery is a 5th or 6th round pick for me, I know I'm getting an RB2 value in my personal opinion, and I think that's worth it a million times over. So don't be afraid of David Montgomery in that Texans uniform. I think he's a big time value and a big time breakout.
Yeah, I mean, this is running back Frankenstein. They called him coming out of college.
Yep. I remember that.
The thing with David Montgomery is it's similar to your Kyler Murray pick in our quarterback breakouts. Go check that out if you haven't already. this is a guy who's done the thing before. He's
Yes.
been a running back one before, so we know he can handle it. Obviously, more miles, more age on his body, but we know he can handle that workload. He profiles as a guy who can be a workhorse, kind of like what I was saying about Omarion Hampton, how that archetype of running back, there's not that many of them. David Montgomery might not be the best one, but he does bring that skill set to the table, what you're looking for in a fantasy running back. And we saw it 2 years ago with Joe Mixon in Houston. They took a chance on an older, inefficient Joe Mixon, made him the bell cow, made him the workhorse. He was an inefficient runner, but he's shown he could be great in pass pro, can be great in the receiving game. And Joe Mixon had a great season for the Texans. I expect the same with David Montgomery, and maybe even more efficiency because David Montgomery's playing behind a better offensive line than Joe Mixon did 2 years ago. So, yeah, I think David Montgomery is going to be awesome for fantasy football. Like you said, this is a guy who has, I think, a very, very high floor with the ceiling there to be a running back one in fantasy football.
Completely agree. And as I said before, I can't push this point home enough. What an organization does tells you exactly how they value him and what they plan on doing. They didn't have to go sign David Montgomery in free agency. They had to go out of their way to go trade a 4th-round pick to go get him. This was clearly a guy that they targeted and actively wanted on their team. So I'm expecting him to have a huge year and be the guy.
For sure. Before we give our next running back breakout, make sure you guys subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment down below. It goes a long way. We're going to be pushing out a ton of fantasy football content all summer. That's a good transition for me. You mentioned a franchise tells you a lot about fantasy football players and what they want to do. My next breakout, I actually switched it up from what I texted you. I'm going with Chris Rodriguez as my breakout running back. This was a tough one for me because I like both players in this backfield a ton. I'm a very big fan of C-Rod, and I'm a very, very big fan of Bishol Tootin. But the Jaguars went out. They gave Chris Rodriguez a 2-year, $12 million contract. That's not just chump money, extra money laying on the side. They gave him a nice little contract because they have a plan for him. This is a Liam Cohen guy. He was one of Liam Cohen's first ever recruits when he was coaching over at Kentucky. Liam Cohen handpicked Chris Rodriguez to come in and I think be the Travis Etienne replacement. And it's tough with these guys because they've both, Tootin going into his second year, C-Rod kind of just bursted onto the scene a little bit last year. There's not much of a sample for both of them. But looking just at last year, Chris Rodriguez was the better football player.
Yes, he was.
Average 4.5 yards per carry to Tootin's 3.7 in a much worse scheme. Tootin was in that Liam Cohen scheme, the running back whisperer that makes Travis Etienne and Bucky Irving look great. Tootin averaged 3.7 yards per carry. C-Rod, according to PFF, had a breakaway run percentage of 20 compared to Tootin's 4.9. And Tootin's supposed to be the explosive, big play, home run hitter. He's obviously going to be the power back in this offense.
Yep.
That's a no question asked. Even though Tootin, I think, actually surprisingly saw a lot of goal line work for the Jaguars last year. C-Rod, that's his bread and butter, is being a bruiser, being a power back. He was 14th in yards over expected per carry, 6th in EPA per rush, 8th in success rate, and 3rd in yards after contact per attempt. And the best part about C-Rod, again, not too much about ADP and draft costs right now. He's basically free in drafts. Mm-hmm. He's a dart throw. You take him with one of your last few picks. This is a guy who I expect to lead the Jacksonville Jaguars backfield in touches, and this is a guy who, similar to Jordan Mason, if Tootin goes down at some point, this is the steal of the draft. This is a league winner hiding in plain sight. And the thing about C-Rod, I'll just end with this, kind of reiterating my point. C-Rod's going to get the valuable touches in this backfield. I think that's a no-brainer for me. He's going to be the power back. He's going to be the goal line back. Tootin, maybe you'd expect him to be the receiving back, but they have this guy in LaQuint Allen, who's one of the best pass-blocking running backs in the league, who they had on the field last year as a three-headed monster with Travis Etienne and Tootin. So it's like Tootin's not going to be the power back. He's going to get some receiving work, but he's not going to be the primary receiving back. Tootin's going to get the carries between the 20s. So it's like, how valuable is that? Not to be an anti-Tootin thing, but yeah, I think C-Rod's going to eat, man.
It's funny because we texted about this prior to recording, and your original pick was Tootin, and I said to you, I was like, you're backing off the C-Rod hype train now. And I'm glad you got back on it because the guy is a great running back that just hasn't been given the opportunity yet in his career. That's probably my only concern to this point. We haven't seen the guy with a full workload. What does it look like when the guy is actually the lead back? But yeah, no, I think C-Rod's going to be awesome in an offense that is just great.
Great offense, right. They're going to score a ton of points.
Exactly.
He's going to have a ton of red zone and inside the 5 opportunities. Like, this is a guy who could be top 5 amongst all running backs and carries inside the 5.
Yep.
And that's a very valuable thing in fantasy football.
So valuable.
I know everyone's always looking for the receiving backs, the PPR guys, but you want guys who are going to have an opportunity to score a touchdown. A touchdown is always worth the most at the end of the day. So, yeah, love C-Rod.
For sure. And this next guy it's kind of in a similar boat to where we really don't know what the backfield situation is going to look like. But again, I'm keeping up a trend here where a lot of my guys are re-breakouts. Guys that have been great in the past, either had a down season, had an injury or something like that. My guy's Chuba Hubbard. And look, I don't want to bring up last year's numbers because they aren't pretty. But also at the same time, Chuba Hubbard dealt with a calf injury last year that limited him. And also we saw God on a football field in Rico Dowdle. So there really wasn't much the guy could do after Rico Dowdle ripped off a couple 200-yard games. But Chuba Hubbard is just – he's going to be, in my personal opinion, similar to what he was a couple years ago now that he's healthy. And also, while everyone is pumping the Jonathan Brooks hype train, the guy hasn't even played an NFL football game at this point because of injury. We've seen him in the preseason. We saw him look like him that one time. But I can't rely on Jonathan Brooks to stay healthy for a full 17. And if he doesn't, if he misses any time, Chuba Hubbard's an RB1 in fantasy football because of volume alone. And volume in fantasy is king. So I'll just bring up some numbers from 2 years ago just to hype up Chuba Hubbard at least a little bit. The guy was 11th in forced missed tackles amongst qualified runners and 7th in yards after contact per attempt. I mean, he was incredible. He averaged 4.8 yards per carry, and he was involved in the passing game as well. So we've seen proof of concept that the guy can catch the ball and be involved in the passing game. So I do believe the volume is going to be there for Chuba this year. There isn't any competition, and I think we'll be witnessing similar to what we witnessed a couple years ago of the Chuba Hubbard breakout.
This is tough for me because I'm just a Panthers guy through and through. I love Chuba. I love Jonathan Brooks. And it's hard to predict what's going to happen here.
Yes.
Because I think if Jonathan Brooks is on the field at 100%, which they're saying he is, I think he's a valuable player who's fantasy to the side for a second. He's a player who's going to be on the field. He's, you mentioned forced missed tackles with Chuba. That's kind of Jonathan Brooks's calling card, contact balance, not being able to bring him down. Very similar to like an Aaron Jones, I think about with Jonathan Brooks. Like, if he's 100%, he's too good to not be on the field. If this becomes a timeshare, it gets ugly for Chuba. It got ugly last year. I mean, I remember when the Panthers played the Jets, it was the game that Bryce got hurt. I went to that game with Dean, and that was, I think, Chuba's first game back after the injury while Rico was on his hot streak. And, I mean, Canales did one drive on, one drive off for those guys, which was just very strange to see. And that's kind of how Canales operated basically the rest of the season, and neither of those guys could get into a rhythm. And that's kind of my fear with both of them is how Canales deploys them and will they be able to get into a rhythm. But I think if Jonathan Brooks isn't healthy, then Chuba's a league winner. And he's a guy who I want to draft for that potential upside. I kind of want to draft both of these guys. Honestly, I want to, we play in a lot of leagues. We're both in like 10+ leagues every year. Like, I want to have shares of both of these guys. Like, Chuba's a guy who I'm not going out of my way to get in every league. He's not one of those guys like an Omarion Hampton who I'm going to want every time that I'm at the 1-2 turn. But I want to have some shares of Chuba, so I definitely like the pick there.
It's scary because it's a bet on. Obviously, I don't want anybody to get hurt. I want Jonathan Brooks to be as healthy as possible, and I want to see what Jonathan Brooks is capable of. It's just a running back coming off a torn Achilles and a torn ACL.
Well, no,
the guy,
it was two ACLs.
It was two ACLs? Two ACLs? I mean, a guy that comes off an injury like that on the same leg, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
It's damn near impossible for you to come back even close to the guy that you were expected to be. And if there isn't a Jonathan Brooks that they drafted him to be, Chuba Hubbard's going to be super involved, in my personal
Right.
opinion. You just can't keep him off the field at that point.
Right, yeah. It kind of depends where you lie on Jonathan Brooks. Like, again, I was a big believer in Jonathan Brooks coming out of college, so, like, that's what makes it tough for me. But the data and history says this is probably Chuba Hubbard's backfield, and he should be a workhorse. So I like the pick. To end this video, my final running back breakout, another second-year guy. This one was tough for me, but I went with TreVeyon Henderson. It was ugly for TreVeyon last year. It was a weird year for TreVeyon because it started out so ugly. Then it got really, really good. Then it got mediocre.
Yep.
And then we saw the NFL playoffs, and it was really, really, really ugly.
Boy.
I'll kind of make the same point I made about Hampton with TreVeyon. In games where he saw 15-plus touches, it was 6 games. He was seeing 16 rush attempts a game, 93.3 rushing yards per game, 5.7 a carry, and then giving you 3 receptions on about 3 targets and 6 touchdowns during that stretch. He showed kind of similar to what we talked about with Chuba and Jonathan Brooks missing time. TreVeyon showed if Ramondre happens to miss time during the season, he's a guy who's capable of being a fantasy stud.
Yep.
The problem with that is Ramondre was great for them last year.
He was awesome.
Ramondre was incredible. My saving grace with TreVeyon is, like I mentioned, he started in the doghouse off the rip last year. It was all Ramondre early on. Then Ramondre missed time, and TreVeyon had those great games down the stretch. Once Ramondre came back the rest of the regular season, it was basically an even timeshare. And if you really want to break it down, TreVeyon was getting more touches than Ramondre. It was a 14-11 a game split. So we've seen Josh McDaniels. He's been around a long time. He's always going to use a committee. He's always going to deploy 2 running backs. The thing with TreVeyon is he's so good that he doesn't need to be a bell cow. You know, that's kind of the word of the day, being a bell cow. Only so many guys could do it. TreVeyon can be effective in fantasy football without having to be that because he has the home run ability. This is a guy who, in such a weird year that didn't really go too well, he put up 1,100 total yards and 10 touchdowns. He's going into his second year. A lot of the reason why he didn't get on the field was silly little things, pass pro, not knowing his scheme. Obviously, he's a guy who has terrible vision. That's a conversation for another day.
Yep.
He could still make it happen with his terrible vision, but this is a guy whose calling card coming out was his pass pro, and I feel like you just have to expect that to improve in year 2. The guy was a rookie last year. You have to expect that to improve because he was so great at it in college, and I think that's kind of going to be his way to get onto the field. He makes a big play. McDaniel is going to want to go back to him. So I think TreVeyon, I don't think he's going to be an RB1. I think he was good enough last year that he's going to get more opportunity this year and have a chance to fully break out.
Yeah, in an ideal world, you see this as a Gibbs-Monty situation, almost identical. I mean, and TreVeyon being the Gibbs, obviously, in that situation, I do agree that this is a guy where it's like post-hype sleeper because I still expect TreVeyon to be drafted highly, probably in the top 4 rounds. But people were so high on him last year as a rookie that he had a good year and still didn't live up to expectations. So now everyone's so down on him. I think I personally do completely agree. I think TreVeyon is a big-time breakout candidate. And, I mean, it's perfect. It's made for him to be the guy that he is supposed to be. Just run outside the tackles. Ramondre will handle all the dirty work, and he's going to get all the passing work probably. So that's huge.
Yeah. Yeah, the last point with TreVeyon is I know the NFL playoffs left a sour taste in everyone's mouth, mine included. I think a lot of that was just the gauntlet of defenses that they faced, and this was a team that had real expectations, and they needed to go with what they trusted. And I think TreVeyon didn't show enough to be trusted in those high-leverage, gotta-have-it situations and moments in games. I think with a full summer to kind of work his way, it's, everything stayed the same there, right? You still have Rabes, you still have McDaniel. It's the same scheme, same offense. I think TreVeyon with another year to kind of learn the NFL and learn the offense, I think he's going to be better. So.
And an O-line that's improved.
O-line that's improved for sure.
So a lot of things working in TreVeyon's favor.
For sure. Make sure you guys leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already for what's going to be daily fantasy football content for the entire month of August. So a week from when you're seeing this, a week and a half from when you're seeing this. Comment down below your favorite fantasy football running back breakout for this year, if it's a guy who we didn't mention, or one of the guys we mentioned, just who you like this year. And yeah, with that,
Ball game.